Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today we're going over a pure ZEFRA deck profile yet again. That's right, I still love this deck. It's one of my favorite decks to play, period, competitively, because it's not expected by a lot of people, and given the certain format, particularly right now, it is very, very good in my opinion. Last format, it was a little bit less good. I love that because the format's just so mid-range. Nobody's really trying to set up like crazy unbeatable boards, which this deck can struggle with. Just, you know, lose a die roll. It's going to be tough to win that duel sometimes. Whereas this format, you know, Despy is not setting up crazy boards. You know, obviously, Eldritch isn't setting up crazy boards. Floowandereeze is not really that big of a problem for this deck at all. But yeah, it's just really good. I have some interesting spice, something different that I don't think I've tried before. We're excited to show you that here, and then at the end we'll talk about like the future of Zephyrs, because I do think there are some interesting, at least one interesting thing that I'm curious to test out in the upcoming months. But yeah, without further ado, let's just jump into this thing, starting off with the standard pure ZEFRA lineup. This is a control build, by the way, guys. Do not sleep on that. The fact that a pendulum control deck can and does exist, and it actually works really well. Trust me, this deck is no joke. If more people played it, like, this deck could be so much more respected. But yeah, for the high scales, you've got your triple Zefrath, ZEFRA New, ZEFRA Acceton, and one Wendy. So if you want to compare this to something like Subterra, that's like the easiest comparison I can make. Zefrath is the best starter in the deck, so it is like more like Hidden City than anything. Whereas ZEFRA New is more like your guru. So like without this, the deck doesn't really do enough, but without this, the deck doesn't have like a legit like starter to get the plays going. But this deck has such more easy access to Zefrath than Subterras do to Hidden City. So really awesome card. This card sends any ZEFRA name to the top of the extra deck. ZEFRA New searches when he's pen summoned or destroyed. Insanely good. ZEFRA Acceton's there is to pop set cards, and ZEFRA Wendy's there to add you another material from your extra deck back to your hand, so that can help you reestablish scales, or that can help you just get extra pendulum material. Definitely comes up. I like these. These are just really good utility cards. The idea here is that Zefrath is normally sending ZEFRA New, so it's becoming a 7 scale when it copies the scale. And so you want to pair it with a low scale. If you don't know, just a quick little rundown there. I know most of you probably do know how Zephyrs work, but yeah, that's pretty standard there. Moving on to the low scales, triple Zefraxy, triple ZEFRA Thubin, and 1 copy of ZEFRA Naga. This is also pretty standard, I think. Some people don't play ZEFRA Naga. It comes up in weird, awkward hands, but it's just another low scale, worst case scenario, so, you know, not a big deal. I will say this, that because we have, like, Zefraxy, and, like, we have so many ways to search Thubin, I almost think that I should be looking at ways to play, like, 1 or 2 less Thubin and find other, like, generic 1 scales that have other utility in the deck. Just something I'm thinking about messing around with, and that's where I'll be looking more at like the Valiant stuff when that stuff comes out, because I do think they have a little bit of legitimacy here as extenders as well as scales at the same time, but we'll talk about that at the end. But yeah, like weird hands when you open like ZEFRA New plus Zefrath only, and ZEFRA Naga can kind of help that hand be a little more playable. But Thubin popping face-up cards, Naga bouncing your scales back to your hand, and Fraxy turning another ZEFRA into a tuner on pen summon. Very good, helps you set up synchro plays, and your synchro plays are some of the most powerful like extra deck plays the deck can make. But that's it for all of your pendulum monsters. I think it's 15, if I'm not mistaken. So moving on here, we move to the normal summons of the deck. I'm on triple Planet Pathfinder. Does this card have a holo printing? I don't know, but I don't think it does. But you know what? It deserves it. This card is awesome. I love this card in the deck. So the 2 main factors that I look for when I am playing a secondary engine with the ZEFRA stuff to be like, oh, the deck doesn't use normal summon. Can I play a normal summon engine that helps, 1, increase consistency, and by that I mean give me the utility of either adding me a Zefrath or a low scale to my hand. It needs to be either or, because it means if I have Zefrath but not a low scale, I can get that. If I have low scale but no Zefrath, I can get that. This covers that better than any other engine, I think, that I've played before, normal summon wise. The difference though is that the other thing I want from a normal summon engine is, does this normal summon, if I already have a playable hand with ZEFRA and a low scale, can it raise the ceiling of my deck? The answer is yes, but I'm playing the stuff that does that in the side. So I'm focusing mainly on consistency game one, and then I'm focusing more on specific, you know, whatever the deck I'm playing against stuff for games two. And there's also another engine. I also thought about playing the Therian engine in here, just playing like one copy of the field spell and one Regulus. That way, worst case scenario, you could literally go normal this, tribute it for the field spell, grab Regulus, and then this is a machine engrave. So Regulus would just be immediately live. It's a cool package, but both those cards are kind of bricks in the deck. The deck doesn't naturally put a machine engrave, so it's a little bit clunky there. The other normal summon I play is Cyberstein. If you draw this card, cool. If not, it is part of our searchable crazy end board when you are able to do the Crocodragon Oracle play. I'll explain when we get there. Card's insane. I get it. You pay 5,000 life points, but like you're gonna have like a 90% plus, maybe even higher win percentage when you just like resolve this card for Exterio, because like you're gonna have Exterio backed by at least one counter trap. So you know, your opponent needs more than just one droplets, more than just one Dark Ruler, and more than just any one out or whatever, and then a way to play after that, which is just asking a lot, especially since this deck can grind really well if they don't kill you anyway. Moving on to the hand traps, I only play 4. It's a very small count here, but triple copies of Gamma with the driver and then the one Droll. So the other option is when you do that Crocodragon play, to pretty much search any monster in the game, if you had to use something like Pathfinder earlier in the turn to like make sure you got you know, the right scales off of Oracle, then you would have used your normal summon. So searching out the Cyberstein isn't really doing anything because it takes your normal. So this is like a high impact hand trap we can just search off of that and pass turn with. So we'll probably have 1 or 2 interruptions plus a Droll. That is asking a lot for, you know, a lot of the decks in the meta right now to be able to, one, play through Droll, but then also beat 2 interruptions under that restriction. It is kind of asking a lot, especially for the high impact decks in the format. But Gamma's insane. If you don't know, Gamma's like broken in this deck, whether it's Pathfinder tributing itself for cost and getting ashed, whether it's Oracle, whether it's Providence, whether it's Prosperity. Like, there's so many cards you activate with no monsters on the field, and this card lets you punish people for it. It's mandatory in my opinion. Half the time, like almost every time, I don't even want to side it out, even if it's not even great in a matchup because it's so defensive as well. Just such a versatile card in the deck. For the consistency stuff, triple Oracle, 1 Terraforming, so 4 Oracle, triple Providence, and triple Prosperity. I do think if you want to play this deck as competitively as possible, you do need the triple Prosperity. This deck just plays it so well. You have a lot of nice utility cards in the extra, but a lot of stuff that is not absolutely mandatory at all. So this card essentially just lets you dig 3 to 6 cards deep to find ZEFRA, low scale, you know, sometimes even just hard finding Cyberstein and just sacking duels that way, you know, comes up. And also because this deck is not particularly great going second, this card's really nice to have in the deck as well, because it's either baiting a negate going second, because your opponent's just going to fear what you can find off of this, or it's a card that can dig you for something like Sphere Mode or Lava Golem, and then once you find that card, your opponent can't really do anything, and you're just going to like break their board with one of those. And so it's a very important card in the deck, in my opinion. I think the deck takes a fairly significant like power decrease if you don't play it. I'm sorry, I know it's super expensive. Hopefully it gets a reprint soon, but I do think if you want to play this deck at the highest level, like, it's really good. You can still get away with Desires though. It just, you play a lot of one-ofs in the deck that like can kind of, you can get punished for banishing, but other than that, it's fine. The rest of the spells are these: Called by the Grave and ZEFRA Path. So normally I wouldn't play Called in a deck like this. It can actually just be a little bit too clunky because you already need to see a 2-card combo just to play. And this deck doesn't lose to a lot of hand traps anyway, but the only 2 hand traps you really care about are exactly Droll and Lockbird and Ogre on ZEFRA. Other than that, you do not care about like any hand traps really, unless your hand's already poop. An Ash can be annoying, but yeah, like Called, being able to stop those 2 specifically, especially post side, you're probably expecting to see Droll a fair amount of the time. It can really be helpful, and it's also why Gamma is so good, because Gamma also is hitting both of those pretty much when your opponent would ever be dropping them on you anyway. And then ZEFRA Path. This card's insane. It's an insane floodgate that says either player can only special summon from hand or extra deck. Nowhere else. You cannot summon from grave, so a Luber is turned off there. You cannot summon from banish, so you know, that hurts some decks. Trying to think what deck I don't know off the top of my head where that's there. You can't summon from deck, so Halki Fibrax literally can't resolve. I sold any of those cards. Scarlet Elixir the Scarlet Sanguine can't resolve. And no tokens or trap monsters can be summoned. So literally they can't activate Scarlet Sanguine, and they can't activate either of the golden lands. It's hilarious. The Eldritch deck literally can't play unless they like hard draw Eldritch, in which case you probably have an Omni Negate to like play against it. It's so crazy. Also, Sword Soul can't summon tokens, so they literally can't play. This is just even better than hitting them with Token Collector. Already talked about Eldritch. Luber can't come back. Flunderies doesn't care about this too much, but that just makes it an easy side out. But like, you don't care about a lot about what Flunder's generally set up to, so it's kind of a wash there. And then for the traps, double war, 1 9 pillars, 1 divine strike. This is so good. I've played triple war before. It feels a little bit too clunky. You just see it a little bit too often. I've seen double copies of it fairly often, so wanted to avoid that. But yeah, this is pretty standard, I think. These are fine to draw as long as your hand is playable around it. So they're like pseudo bricks. They don't help the engine go, but if you see them with like a decent hand, it just makes your end board like that much stronger. Then we get to the extra deck. I'm on 1 gravity controller. It's the only like one you play. If you play a control-based pendulum deck, you got to play this card. It's too good. Then for a bunch of Link 2s, the new Beyond the Pendulum, 1 Lina the Light Charmer, 1 Ossa, 1 Lambda, and 1 Masquerena. I have a bunch of Link 2s here. They all have different utilities. Lina and Ossa allowing us to extend with monsters in our opponent's grave definitely comes up. Beyond the Pendulum, also really huge. This card is really cool. So if you don't know what it does because it's so new, on Link Summon, it can, if it's Link Summon to the extra monster zone, you can pay 1,000 or 1,200, I'm sorry, to add any Pendulum monster from your deck to your hand. But for the rest of the turn, until you Pendulum Summon, you can't activate that monster's effects or activate any effects in the Pendulum scale. So the unfortunate side of this restriction means we can't just search ZEFRA off of this, like, so that even if we just played like enough extenders in the deck, we'd be able to like search ZEFRA as a scale. He's obviously like the best scale we can get, and then activate him, send a card, and then go to town. Unfortunately, you can't get the send off as ZEFRA, so he's just like an awkward 5 scale at that point. But it can still search us a free extra pendulum material, which can be literally anything. This can still just search like ZEFRA New if we didn't have access to ZEFRA New, and then pen summon. So even if we like weren't able to get access to ZEFRA New, we'd be able to like search in that way, or search Zefraxi to just get into that Croco Dragon play if we need to. Insanely good. Also playing into boards, this card's really nice because if 2 monsters with different, levels? If 2 monsters with different original levels are pen summoned at the same time to this card's zones, you can target 2 cards on the field and destroy them. So like you're literally going to go pen, and then you can even chain block this if you're summoning like ZEFRA New, Zefraxi, and almost all of them can chain block this. And then you pop 2 cards, and then you have 4 materials already on board. So you can make an access code or, you know, whatever. I do play some other cards as well. So it's a really cool card. I think it'll come up. It's not as ideal as it could have been, but it's still really, I think, playable in the deck. Obviously, we know these. Lambda is to make Gamma live and also be able to potentially bluff Gamma versus your opponent. That can come up, especially if you can practice scenarios where that you could like potentially mess with your opponent's head. And then IP Masquerena. Sometimes you just have access to a lot of pendulum material, but not any of like the actual ZEFRA interruptions. So being able to just take any 2 monsters into this, it has good zones for pendulum summoning, and it gives you the ability to quick go into Unicorn or another target that I'll show you as well. Speaking of which, the Unicorn, the access code, and 1 Underworld Goddess. Really interesting card. You know, there's a Psychic End Punisher running around a little bit in the format, so being able to clear him can be huge. It's like a graveyard hate card, so like kind of has decent plays versus Despia. It's a big body. It's cool. It can come up for sure. And then access code obviously allowing us to kill, and then Nightmare Unicorn just for the removal. A lot of the removal in our deck is destruction, so having Unicorn is very important in my opinion. I would not play it. It just comes up all the time. Moving into the Exeeds, just the Dampire Vampire Sheridan with the Dampire Vampire Sheridan with Metaphys Horus. This combination's insane because Horus says if it's made with a pendulum monster and an effect monster, which it literally always will be, you can negate a card on the field, any face-up card on the field permanently, and force your opponent to give you control of one of their monsters. They get to pick, but if you do a good job at picking off other stuff and leaving only one monster, they have to just give you their only monster. And then Sheridan can use, if you control a monster owned by your opponent, it counts as a 6 for him. So then this is a 6, your opponent's forced to give you one, and then you can just overlay these for him. He gives you extra removal and extension. It's a crazy play. When it resolves, it just feels like insanely powerful. One side frame Lord Omega. This is just for Gamma. If you resolve Gamma on your turn going first, it feels like an FTK because they're going to lose the hand trap they discarded. Then you're going to Omega rip another card out of their hand. And, you know, if you're able to fire that, you presumably already had a playable hand. So then you're going to end on, you know, floodgates and interruptions, and good luck to your opponent. One Ravenous Crocodile. This card's insane. It's just how you do the standard play that lets you search any monster in the game. Broken. And one Shen Shen. This is an ulterior Synchro 9 play. If you don't really care about the draw or you don't have access to Oracle, just being able to make this for the Floodgate and just a recurring body as well can definitely come up. So it's cool. I think that's pretty good. I also thought about playing another like 8 or something, maybe like a Scarlight Red Dragon Archfiend for when you like resolve Gamma on your turn going second, and then you're just able to go into Scarlight and like wipe your opponent's board. It's pretty funny, but it's kind of like wishful thinking also. There's you can always make use of Gamma. That's just another use. It's not like it's going to go to waste otherwise. And the last card in the extra is Exterio. This card can negate any spell or trap, not once per turn, by banishing a card in your grave and then milling the top card of your deck. It's not even once per chain, so even if your opponent goes effect, you know, you negate it, they try to chain, negate that, they try to chain something else, negate that. It's broken. This card is so broken. And the reason it's broken in this deck specifically is you like never ever just pass on Exterio. You are always passing on Exterio backed by like Divine Strike or 9 Pillars. Which means you have an Omni Negate, which means unless your opponent's Dark Ruler, or not Dark Ruler, unless your opponent's like dropletting you by discarding a trap, they like literally they literally can't turn this card off most scenarios. They need to have like 2 separate ways to turn this off in which don't involve something he can negate, and also have a way to play after doing that. So it's just asking way too much, in my opinion. Once you usually set that up, you should have like a 95% win percentage, if not higher. It's like so broken. And plus the format we're in, where like Despia can't play if they can't resolve their spells. Eldritch obviously can't play if it can't resolve any traps. They lose to Path anyway, so that matchup's like a bye. Regardless, you just like shit on other control decks. The way this control deck works, it just is like impossible for other control decks to handle unless they have like a very specific matchup like edge on you. Other than that, the other decks in the format, like Sword Soul doesn't directly lose to Exterio, but like a lot of times you're going to blank like 2 to 4 cards in their hand, depending on how many spells they open. So it's still really powerful. And then I guess I would say like the plant deck, I guess, is really popular right now. So like whether it's the Therian Field spell that they can't get to Regulus with, whether it's any of the spells that get them to Sunseed Genius Lochi, or just any of the Adventure Engine cards, they have to go through Rite of Aramis here. So many decks are just playing a 10-card engine that like if they don't resolve the spells, just literally are just dead. So it's just 10 cards in their deck that are pretty much just dead because of Exterio. Insanely strong. Don't need to explain that anymore. And then I'll show you the side deck too, because it does have a particular side deck, and because I actually am like wanting to play this deck competitively, I do actually have a side deck. First up is one Token Collector. I'd like to play more of this, but I did just have to make room for more Despia hate. But it's still like you have the combo that can search any monster. So going first, this is like searchable versus Sword Soul. So like ending on this plus 1 counter trap is like game versus Sword Soul pretty much. Other hand trap I play is Triple Dimension Shifter. This is kind of the Despia hate, but also it kind of functions as hate for other decks as well. I just honestly didn't have a lot of Despia hate. I think the matchup is fine versus Despia, but you kind of need to have a little something else for them, like post side for when you want to side out like the cards that are less good, for sure. So I do still like the Shifter, and it's so good versus other decks too. Like the Sun Avalon deck, it's broken against. The Therian decks, like so broken versus Therian, straight up. Obviously, well, it's okay versus Eldritch because they can play the slow game. They can just set everything, but yeah. Here, Double Alpha. I like this card a lot. Feels really good versus Sword Soul. Plus, if you ever run into rogue matchups, this card and like Pank are just so generically good versus those decks. 2 Lava Golem, and I'm also on 2 Sphere Mode. This is definitely arguable of playing with like 3 Lava Golem and dropping Sphere Mode or vice versa. Here's the thing though. I like Sword Soul is like a good deck in the format, seeing a lot of play right now. I think this is greedy versus Sword Soul. They need to open a really good hand to put 3 monsters on the field, but most of the time they're guaranteed ending 2. So I feel like Lava Golem is just so much safer in those scenarios. And Sphere Mode is just kind of like a little more greedy. But if I do play against like the plant decks, I can just guaranteed let them resolve their plant combo, in which case you'll be able to wipe everything. They'll lose Bengal Lancer will have been reborn, so they'll just lose Bengal Lancer. You can like get rid of the Link 4 if they end on the Rika Exceed 8 monster, like you can remove that. Like there's so many targets in that deck. There's also Griffin Rider, there's also Therian Regulus if they ended on it. Like you literally just can, they're good, but I like having like the versatility, and also you can side both copies if you want into certain matchups if you're really fearful. So there, a couple one-offs, 1 Harpy's Feather Duster and 1 Zombie World. This is just the 1 back row hate card. It's like whatever, it's just a bomb. Like I don't know. It's just if you play against a back row deck, you're siding out like Called by the Grave most likely. So something like this is just kind of like a high impact power card against them. And then Zombie World. This card's crazy because if you already have a playable hand and see either Terraforming or Pathfinder, and so like you don't need to search Oracle, you can just search this. So versus Fluanderies, they literally can't tribute someone with this up. People know this, which means, but like also, if we had a playable hand, this is backed by a counter trap. So like Flenders need 2 ways to remove this, and they need to be able to play with the rest of the cards in their hand. So again, you're kind of just putting them on like have an insanely good hand, or like you just auto lose if I set this up. And the last card in the side, I mean, Jesus, is Triple Exchange. This card is broken in this deck because you play so many cards just nobody cares about. Plus, you're playing a Pendulum deck. So if you have Zefrath and a low scale, and that's all you really care about, you can just go like activate Zefrath, activate low scale, set, Prosperity, we'll activate that in a second, set Providence, set Oracle, and then literally activate this with like the worst card left in your hand. And so your opponent just has to take like the Psyframe Driver or something, and then you just get to like take a hand trap from their hand. 1, get hand knowledge of like what like interruption you want to search for off of the ZEFRA play, and 2, but like if you're lucky, like this can't be ashed or anything. So if you haven't done anything that can be ashed, you literally just like take an ash. So now you get an ash, you know their entire hand, you gave them a useless card in response, and now you know exactly what like interruptions to set up so that they can't beat it. So broken. This card is crazy. You can even do this before your opponent can droll, so that you just like take droll from their hand and they just lose. It's crazy. It's really, really good. It's like the most broken going first card in the deck, but you do need to see a playable hand with it. That's the only caveat, but luckily with, Pathfinder added to the deck, the consistency of this version is as high as it's ever been, in my opinion, in terms of like just at least getting bare minimum Zefrath and a low scale. Which I love. So, yeah, all in all, I can't complain. I guess like there's the only like 2 things that I think are like particularly noteworthy is 1, I would love to have another field spell in the main that I felt comfortable with. Like I could have mained Zombie World. I could have mained like Necro Valley as a secondary like search target for the Pathfinder if I already had a good hand. But outside of those, it's like the Therian field spell, in which case the field spell or Regulus do kind of function as bricks unless you are able to get to, a Machine Engrave, which is just kind of awkward in a Pendulum deck. But other than that, it would come down to the Valiant stuff. So what I do think is like, because Thuban's super searchable, you don't need to play 3 of him. And I don't even know that Naga's 100% necessary. So we could have at least 3 slots to just play 3 low scales from the Valiant archetype. That 1 could function as extenders to get you 2 stuff like Beyond the Pendulum, pre-pendulum summon, and get an extra like pendulum, like monster search to be able to get things going. And it has 2 zones down, so you'd be able to like pen summon for 3 or 4 turn 1. It makes Appaloosa setups much more possible for like, you know, 3 or 4 materials, right? Just for extra powerful interruption. Like, I do think there's some definite validity there. I'll be curious to see when the Valiant stuff comes out, if there is any traction there, but it's just something I need to look into when it comes out. Because I've also heard, you know, a little bit of mixture of like the Valiant stuff can be really cool, but the problem is you have to see ZEFRA. If you just see Valiant stuff, it's not enough. If you see ZEFRA stuff, it can be okay, but you like have to see ZEFRA. So I might still be forced to play Pathfinder in that variant or something, just to, you know, maximize our odds of getting to this guy. Because if you don't see him, he's just like brutally awful in that variant specifically. But yeah, that's it. Hopefully this helps you. Hopefully this gives you a good idea of like how you could play pure ZEFRAs at the moment. It's a really strong deck, especially in this format with a lot of mid-range decks. Aside from like the Sun Avalon deck, seems to be the most competent like wombo combo deck that sets up a really powerful board. But post side, you have a lot of stuff that you can handle that deck with, so I'm not overly concerned. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching. As always, guys, subscribe to the channel for more stuff from me down the line, and I will see all of you nubs in the next video. Peace.